And I am convening the WSESD board meeting of November 12th. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all of the public bodies meeting remotely, and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period. Sorry, there's an echo, and I'm wondering, is it me? Now there's no echo. Please note that while we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period, there may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it is important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in this notice. If by chance someone in the public is having trouble connecting, please alert someone in the space by email or by text message, and we will do our very best to reconnect you. Regardless, this meeting will continue. On the agenda, it says that agenda items, if they are on the agenda, they are subject to potential action. In addition, if any board member feels that an item on the consent agenda warrants discussion, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be set aside for discussion. In this way, the consent agenda will be approved in one set aside motion. If there is anything that needs to be pulled, please let the board know now, certainly before we come to the consent agenda. Are there any amendments to the agenda as it's written? Okay. There's only one issue that I'd like to put at the top of board matters, and I'd like to confirm our meeting dates in November and December as we come up to the holidays in both months. Okay. Student matters. This is a time for students to speak with any concerns or questions they may have. So if there are any students online and you would like to comment, now is the time. All right, I don't see any students' hands up. I am going to move on to public comment on non-agenda items. This is a time for the board to listen and to take notes. It is not a time for the board to respond to comments or to engage in dialogue with the public. If appropriate, the board and administration will work on next steps. Are there any hands up during public comment period? Hi, would you identify yourself please and your town?
Stephen Naylor, Dummerston, Vermont. It came to my attention recently that our current school calendar has 4 contingency days, and I'd just like to point out to the board and the administration that the State Rule 2311.4 requires that all school calendars are developed with 5 contingency days in the calendar. So perhaps there could be a check and balance in the future on the school calendar. I sit on the board of a camp. We're trying to schedule the beginning of the camp. School's going very late this year, and I said, well, they have 5 snow days and realized there's only 4. So it does have a ripple effect on other organizations that are serving children. So if in future calendars we could make sure that that is, and perhaps have a double check on the calendar through the board if the board is creating an event through the superintendent's office. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a great catch. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other comments, public comment on non-agenda items? Please identify yourself and your town.
Martha Noyce, Brattleboro. Yes, I'm here again this evening to remind and encourage the school principals the board members, their various committees, to keep in mind providing and formulating a lean budget while still providing a quality education and a proficient student who would leave the town graduated, and a good citizen, while, like I said, keeping in mind a lean, trim budget, which is kind of the talk of the state and the country at this point. Trimming budget, keeping things reasonable.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other comments from the public on non-agenda items? Give it a minute. Okay, again, this is for the public comment on non-agenda items. Is there anyone else in the public who would like to speak at this point? I don't see any hands. So we are going to move on to board matters. And as I said, I would like to confirm meeting dates for November and December, and just make sure I'm reading this correctly as we come up to these holidays at the end of the month. Okay, this is November 12th. The next meeting as scheduled would be November 26th. That is, as I look at the district's calendar, that is an in-service day for teachers, I do believe, and that is Thanksgiving week. Are we meeting on the 26th? Can we meet on the 26th? Okay, I'm looking at administration, and I think that's really why I'm bringing this up right now, to make sure this works, and I see nods. Okay, we are meeting on the 26th of November, and that just, again, is 2 days before Thanksgiving. Okay, and let's just turn the page, or at least I'm turning the page, to December. We have a December 10th meeting, and then the next meeting would typically be, oh my goodness, December 24th. Are we meeting on December 24th? I'm seeing nods from administration, but in the reverse way. Okay, we are not meeting on the 24th. Does that mean that we are having only one meeting in December? On the 10th?
That's how we arrange the calendar. The
So
presentation
true,
calendar.
so true. I'm just thinking about all sorts of dates, and as well thinking about the summit, because the SD board is devoted to the summit coming up in February, and so that changes our meeting schedule, albeit we're meeting with the other two boards, VES, Vernon, and the supervisory union. But I just want everyone to think about December. We don't need to make a decision right now, but let's, Ruby.
I have the benefit of looking at the budget planning document, which I just want to flag for Frank. It looks to me like you have the wrong date here on line 17 for when the budget is first presented to the board. So I guess my question is really having to do with how we as a board interface with and what we're doing in terms of the budget planning process. I feel a little bit anxious about having one meeting of this board in December at like the busiest time of budget development. That being said, I'm part of the finance committee meeting and we're having a whole host of them. There are other opportunities to engage with the board rather than just the board meetings. But so anyway, I don't know that I have a strong opinion, except I feel anxious about only having one meeting in December,
You're talking about one SD meeting
SD meeting
in December.
in December.
Okay, Frank,
Yeah, so that December 17 is intentional. It's not an error. That was the purpose of our finance committee, to look at all of these dates and make sure that, like we did with the finance committee, we clarify anything we need to clarify. But the reason why it's the 17th is because we're looking for the all-important yield and weighted average ADM on the 16th. To have a meeting before that is not productive in terms of a comprehensive draft. Years ago, we learned the hard way that is not a good idea. From the point of view that if that data comes in that drastically changes the definition of fiscally responsible, it's very bad public policy to have a draft of employment and all of those assumptions that go in and then have to pull that back and say, gee, it's a whole different world today. And that's why it's the 17th. And I knew that folks didn't want to meet on the 24th.
so can I just confirm, on the 17th, is that a presentation to the SD board?
Yeah, that's the first comprehensive draft of the budget. And as you know, based on the timeline that we just reviewed, the second draft would be January 14, and the third draft is the 28th. And if the board wants to have another draft, that's certainly possible.
So again, confirming, that means that the SD is meeting on December 10, and then the SD is again meeting on the 17th.
Yeah, the 17th isn't reflected in the presentation calendar, so that's where the difference is.
Okay, Ruby.
So I guess I'm wondering if it makes sense for if Deborah as chair, if you want to keep the 10th in terms of our regular cycle and there's board work that needs to be done. But honoring this reality that we won't have yield information until earliest the 17th, really, to have a meaningful conversation. I wonder if we actually keep the 10th and for board work and add a meeting, and also have a meeting on the 17th that is solely for that budgeting work. I think I sense the real struggle at this time is how to hold what we always do and the things that come up and this really important budget work. And I'm not sure, I think that having 2 meetings may be an appropriate thing. And I think that's the solution myself.
And your word was appropriate, not inappropriate.
Yes.
Okay, appropriate. So, well, that would resolve the issue that I'm raising about only one SD meeting in December, and now we would have 2. Okay, so we're still discussing this. Tim?
I just want to support what Ruby just said. That makes a lot of sense to me, having 2 meetings on the 10th and 17th.
Okay. So that would be a 6 p.m. WSESD meeting on the 17th, and the location will be Coosa. Okay, that is not on the 17th is not on the calendar, is it? I'm not misreading.
It's
the
not
calendar.
on the presentation calendar.
Got it,
now, but
okay.
It is reflected in Frank's
budget.
timeline.
Yeah. Okay, in Frank's budgetary dates.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. I guess that's what I want to make sure that I have a handle on, that the dates in Frank's calendar that was just presented, we know what we're doing on the SD side of the house. Okay. So we are meeting on the 17th as an SD board. Okay, can you make sure that's in the minutes, like really bold, so that people do not miss that meeting. Matt Shipley.
Perhaps to highlight it, I'd move that the WSESD board move their regularly scheduled 24th meeting to the 17th of December.
Second.
Is there any discussion? With that in mind, all in favor of the motion as presented by Matt Chibley that the board move a regularly scheduled meeting on Christmas Eve, or December 24th, to December 17th, the week before, at 6 p.m. inclusive. That's the motion. All those in favor? Well, is there any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, that takes care of my concerns about dates. All right, moving on. Leadership Council updates. Leadership Council updates.
yeah.
Tim,
Yeah, Vance had another very good leadership council meeting, I think. And Keith, feel free to chime in here. Keith sent out a survey to families. He got a terrific response. Do you recall what the response rate was?
79.
79 responses. And he asked, what's of concern to you? Number one on the parents list, not surprising, was social emotional learning. Compared to number 5 on the list, which was academic performance. So it's an interesting survey. I'm sure that Keith would share it with other leadership councils if they are interested. Also, speaking of policies, I asked the parents there if they were aware of the family engagement policy. None were. This is one of those policies that should be of interest to families, to parents. It's a good policy, and I encourage all leadership councils to share the family engagement policy with their families in the LCs. That's all.
okay, thank
Oh,
you.
there's one more note.
There is one more thing?
Yeah, I don't know if you're gonna talk about, if the superintendent is gonna talk about food, but there
We
were
are-
concerns
we are-
raised about food.
Yeah,
Okay.
we are going to get to that. So, anything else coming from Leadership Council? All right, moving on to board subcommittees. Ruby,
Hi. So the Programmatic and Performance Equity Committee met, and so I'm not gonna really belabor it because if it's on the agenda later, but we invited Susan Grabowski, who works for the SU in central office, and Sheila Humphreys from Food Connects came as well, specifically to talk about equity and access to food across the district. And it was a really enlightening conversation. It was really engaging. And just I would invite anyone who's interested in equity across our, from school to school to come to future meetings. We topically have different things that happen to be what we were talking about, but it was a very engaging conversation.
okay, thank you. Tim,
Well, this is not really a subcommittee, but it could be fit into that slot. Important things happen at the SU meetings, and I wonder if it would be beneficial for the chair of the SU to give an update to the SD on topics raised in the SU as part of the regular subcommittee update format. Or
okay.
is that appropriate to bring up there now?
I think it's a non-agenda item officially, but I don't see why it can't be entertained. It is about the two boards communicating with each other. So what you are proposing is that the issues that are discussed on the SU side of the house be presented at this board meeting.
Actually, I'll make a motion. I move that, as a regular part of our agenda, the SD be provided with an update from the SU meetings.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor.
No second?
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, there is a second. Okay, that was just a pause. I didn't mean there wouldn't be a second. It was just a pause as people were thinking about the motion. So, discussion. Ruby,
I think that there's value to this proposal, and how we do it, I don't care as much about, but I think having regularity with which, if there is something going on at the SU, there's an avenue and a pattern for how to get it back to this board. And what we're doing with the committee updates and the leadership council updates are the closest thing that we currently do. So, it seems like it would be pretty easy to add that in. And it may be, as with like the communications council, you don't ever hear about because there's nothing to talk about. There may be not that much to talk about sometimes, so it doesn't have to be brought up. But if there is, something to be said, that's a good, opportunity for it. So it seems like a good idea to me.
it seems to me that all the committees produce minutes. And then, many of the committees are recorded. We don't have I'm just, thoughts in my head. We have a finance committee, and we get regular updates from the finance committee, but we don't have a motion on the floor that we're gonna get regular updates from the finance committee. And we don't have a motion on the floor that we're gonna get updates from the policy committee. So I'm wondering, is there a concern about where this would officially be on the agenda to guarantee that this takes place?
Could just be as simple as board, subcommittee, and SU updates.
Mhm.
Just adding it to that.
Okay, Kim?
I'm not sure it has to just be the board chair of the SU that gives the updates. We have 4 members on this SD board that go to that meeting that could give updates. It's not just a board chair responsibility.
So, as is true for all of the subcommittees, it's not the responsibility of the chair of the subcommittee to provide an update. Okay, any other discussion? Mark?
I guess something to consider would be, is it a reciprocal expectation of all of the boards? Just open, put it out there for discussion or thoughts.
Can you articulate, do you mean like in the SU meetings, would there be a space for Vernon and the SD to?
And it's same at the Vernon board meetings.
Seems like a good idea. I mean, if we're truly going to be a little network of a community in that way, it's just holding space for anything that's going on. What's going on? Like ear to the ground. It seems like if we create that cycle, then it'll be easy, and like Tim said, it could be as simple as just adding a line that you say, is there anything? And when there's not, you just move past it.
Okay, any other discussion? Matt Shipley?
Are we of the mind that some harm has befallen the board, some information that the board should have had that hasn't come forward to us?
I think there's an issue right now, and I'm just gonna, I think there is an elephant in the room right now, and it's food services. So on the one hand, we've become aware, a number of board members have become aware that there have been some problems with food delivery in our schools on the SD side of the house. Now, the overlap here is that food services belongs to the supervisory union. But I think it's a valid issue to acknowledge tonight. And Mark and I have certainly talked about acknowledging it tonight at the school district meeting. So there's that overlap that we're in right now. And I don't think that represents a problem, but more an issue of open communication between the two boards. I do know that the SU, if you look at the agenda for tomorrow night, is definitely dealing with food services. It's not explicitly on tonight's agenda, but it is implicit under board subcommittees. So in that sense, I think maybe it's ongoing right now, and I have this in my head, that we should be having this shared communication. Okay, I see community hands up, and if it's about this issue, I'll call on you, and if it's not, I'll ask you just to hold your remark until we move past this issue, the motion that's on the floor. Is there a motion on the floor? There is a motion on the floor, yes. Okay, so Jody, your hand was up earlier. I don't know if you want to talk about this, or should I call on you after we finish here? Jody, you need to unmute yourself if you're muted.
Am I unmuted now?
You are unmuted now, Jody.
Okay. Well, my hand went up. I'm Jody Normandeau from Dummerston. My hand went up at the very end of the Leadership Council, but it also, it concerns this issue too, because, they're kind of a subcommittee or a subgroup of the board. And I'm hoping that the board and administration does not forget the fact that there's been requests to have the leadership councils filmed like most of the others. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you. Let's keep that in mind always. Liz Adams of Putney, your hand is up.
Yeah, I'm a community member of the PP&E committee, and I reached out to Carrie Amadon to join the committee, which she did, so that Vernon would have a voice, because we were talking about food services. So Carrie knows what occurred at our meeting, which I'm sure she'll bring up at the SU meeting, but I wanted you to be aware that we didn't forget Vernon in this big picture.
Thank you, Liz. Thanks. Okay, so returning to the motion. Can we hear the motion one more time?
Tim moved that as a regular part of the agenda, the WSESD be updated on the work of the WSESU board.
Point of order, just to go forward. When a motion is made, really the name of the person making the motion shouldn't really enter into it. It should just be a motion because it's a
motion on
board
the floor.
motion.
Right, because it now belongs to the board. Thank you.
Right.
Okay, thanks, Matt, for sharing the motion again. Any further discussion? All right, put it to a vote. All those in favor? So sorry, before we do that, I see two hands, board members, okay. A little bit of a time lag.
Oh, sorry, I'm just going ahead. I'm just voting ahead, sorry.
Oh. Okay, and Brian, were you also voting?
That's right.
Wow, we are really with it tonight. Okay, all those in favor of the motion as read by Matt Shibley, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Indicate by saying no. Any abstentions? So moved. Thank you very much. Sorry, there's a little sidebar humor going on here that I'll leave out of the minutes altogether.
Can I leave while I'm ahead?
So, I raised the issue of what's been going on in some of our schools. Does anybody want to talk to that? I think it came up in your committee, Ruby.
Yes. Yeah. I'm happy to share a little bit more about that conversation. Essentially, in the Programmatic and Performance Equity Committee meeting, we heard from staff, Susan Grabowski, and she is the staff person who really manages the relationship. She's an SU employee that manages the relationship with food service. There have been significant staffing changes within our food service, and those have been a struggle. And I think that at some of our schools, they have really seen that in some lack of, there has always been food to eat, but it has not always been hot food, and it has not been the variety and kind of breadth of food that is articulated in the contract that we have with the food service provider. And so, Susan spoke a little bit to that, and we on that committee were really looking at what is it, at any of our schools, are the kids that are there, do they have access equal, or do they have equity and access to food? And so it was just it just happened to be that this issue was coming up right at the time when we were discussing it. So it made for a very fruitful conversation, and I think that Mark or Frank might have more input to share right now. I don't want to speak for Susan because it is, she's the one who has the relationship with Whitson's, which was, is now what we call Fresh Picks, our food service provider, and but it was, it's been a very intense few weeks because of some of those staffing difficulties that they're having. So that's just a reality that we were talking about.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, we've had
Mark?
some serious performance concerns over relatively to the last month and a half. Concerns around quality, availability, staffing, and just general performance. We've received complaints from multiple schools. I think they're reflected in the school reports you received for tonight's meeting. Frank and I have given blunt feedback with the vice president of the company through email and in person meetings. I do have a letter that Chris Farrow put together to share with this board tonight in terms of his kind of response and plans for moving forward. But I have shared with him that the performance has done harm to their reputation, and it's going to be tough to recover. I have invited him to the SU board meeting tomorrow night. I believe he will be there in person to hear concerns and to answer to those concerns. But it hasn't gone without some very serious feedback and blunt messaging. And Frank, I don't know if you want to add on to that.
Yeah, we've made it clear that we expect them to meet the standard every day. Susan's done a great job engaging our staff and the contracted services to help them understand our expectations, and then we work closely with the Agency of Education's Child Nutrition Program and their monitoring staff. So we've shared all of those kind of performance standards and expectations with them. And unfortunately, since Whitson has acquired the company, we have not found their response to be adequate. And as Mark said, this is definitely a serious failure to perform, which we are going to find a remedy for this.
They do have new staffing coming on board in the next 2 weeks. I think we're going to be setting up some progress monitoring meetings with this company. So Frank and I will be in regular contact with Chris Farrow and be asking for feedback from stakeholders, specifically students, through principals, through leadership councils. But we're expecting a change, and a change to happen sooner than later, like tomorrow.
Okay.
But happy to provide another report update, maybe a month from today.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
And obviously, the burden is on you to monitor this closely, with frequency, to make sure this doesn't happen again. Eva, you have your hand up?
I was just curious about how long this has been, because the report that I got in September was that the food service was fantastic. So I'm just wondering if this is like a really recent thing in the last 2 weeks, or when did it start to kind of fall apart or decline? Maybe that's a better word.
Yeah, it's a good question. 3 or 4 weeks ago, we had 2 of our kitchen leaders resign within the same week. So they have been dealing with low staffing for quite some time now. And we have seen the result has been poor performance and quality. But you're right, we did start the year on a positive note. We've had meetings about this last year where we intervened and things got much better. Unfortunately, after intervening, things have not gotten better because they still remain short-staffed. I don't think that's a good excuse personally, and that's been shared. However, they do have some new staffing coming on board very shortly, and the expectation is the performance and the quality of the food increases drastically.
Great. Ruby?
Can I just ask, the staffing, the highest staffing difficulties are at the BUHS kitchen, is that correct?
An academy school.
An academy school, okay, so
those kitchens affect the other schools as well.
Okay, so that was my question, because in reading the reports that, from each of the schools, there was definitely that refrain.
Yeah.
And it was more than just those 2 schools, so that helps me to see that story. Thank you.
Other comment on this topic? Liz? Adams, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Mark, are you considering surveying the employees of this company? Because they may be poorly treated, they may be poorly paid. With the turnover in staffing, it seems like they aren't paid very well, or maybe are treated quite poorly. And didn't we had an issue earlier this school year where the last lunch period at BUHS, there wasn't food. So, the very beginning of the year sounded great, and then it just it seems to me, if my memory's right, it kind of just went downhill from there.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Tim?
Just a note, Sue Grabowski also dispelled the myth that younger children receive the same number of calories as older children. They don't count calories, but they attend to serving size. And indeed, a first grader receives a smaller serving size than a 16-year-old. And that was just a question that came up at our leadership council and at the SAC meeting too.
So it's not a measurement of caloric intake, but rather size?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on this topic? All right. right, well, this is gonna come up at the SU meeting, tomorrow evening, and certainly at the next board meeting, we will do an update of that discussion as per the motion this evening. Anything else from board subcommittees? The policy meeting, is taking place tomorrow afternoon at 2:00 in the central office. And we will continue with our evaluation of the policy having to do with multilingual learners, as well as the policy having to do with restraint and seclusion. And then, the agenda is posted online. This is for the public to hear, and, with a Zoom link. Anything else? Okay. The next item on the agenda is our board retreat, which is scheduled for November 18. It's going to take place in Cusick from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. The full board will be here, Mark will be here, and we will begin as a warned meeting, but we will then go offline, and it will be a board retreat. We will not be discussing board business, but it will essentially be an evaluation of our working relationships with each other. So that's the update on the board retreat. There's a survey out there, and I sent a reminder last night asking everyone to respond to the survey. The more information that our facilitator, Mary Gannon, has, the stronger the workshop. I would like volunteers to handle food for the 18th, both in terms of organizing, reaching out to board members, dietary restrictions, and then the ordering process and picking it up. So this is a cry for help, please, in doing this.
Okay. Matt and I will do it.
Oh,
I got this.
that was,
I'll do drinks, you do the rest.
I'm counting on you, Tim.
Tim's like, I'll organize the room, you get the rest.
I got you.
That brings chocolate.
Cheese and soda.
okay, Matt and Tim, thank you, that was easy, that was a pause, and suddenly volunteers bubbled to the surface, thank you. Again, it's on the 18th, which means it probably has to be done sooner than later. Yeah, I know, you got it, thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Are there any questions about the retreat? Good, thank you. Moving on, an update. A number of us went to the VSBA annual conference at Lake Morey, October 24 through 25. And I was wondering if we wanted to provide a little feedback to the board about that conference. For those of us who attended. For some of us, it was our second time, and for some of us, it was our first time. So let's start us off, Matt. Thank you.
It was my first time going, and I would just like to congratulate Mark Spino and administration. Many of the things that I heard throughout these sessions that were noted as best practices, as things that progressive, well-run districts should be considering, were many of the things I was sitting there going, yep, we do that. Yep, Mark's talked about that. Yep, I'm confident we're there. So I just, congratulations, I feel like we do. Again, I felt like our district is the best of the 4 counties, or the 4 in Windham County, and I think, again, this shows it, so thank you.
Thank you.
Ruby?
This was my second time attending. I was not blown over by this conference in the way that I was the first time. The first time I felt it was really impactful. This time was kind of like, okay, yeah, that was, there were some good things, but it wasn't exciting. with the exception of on the very first, the night before the primary conference, we had a dinner, which was optional, but our group did attend, and there were some really meaningful presentations by students that I would say were really the highlight for me, and very, very moving. And so it kind of underscores for me what I appreciate about that conference is they do a good job at weaving students in these meaningful ways, and so I appreciated that. And as I think about how do I take that experience, the positiveness of that experience, and bring it back to what we do every day, I do think that I know we don't have students here now, maybe they're in the Zoom room, but we have started to try to have student voice. But this was a very deliberate, artistic representation from students. And I really, really appreciated it. So whether it's in our annual meeting or in some other capacities, inviting students to have a voice, I think would be a good move.
Could you say more about what the students talked about?
So it was a group, I can't remember the actual town.
Winooski,
Was it Winooski?
It was in Winooski, the one that was so moving.
Right.
It was a voice performance,
Yeah.
oral, it was poetry,
Mhm.
written pieces, it was incredible. It was incredible. It was, for the most part, all of color on stage. There were so many students of color on stage, it was mind-blowing.
So there were a number of, that is the one, there were a few different student performances and ways in which students spoke. The one that was the most moving was from Winooski. It was a group primarily female, girls of color and immigrant, children of immigrants, and immigrants themselves. So it was the spoken word and very, very powerful. And most of them were in their later high school years, but it was very moving. And in addition, there were other opportunities that we heard as well that were engaging and wonderful and light. But those ones, it was really powerful. That's all I can say about that.
There was a particularly strong group who were STEM, robotics, and that was great to see that in the public sector, and very, very strong. Eva?
I just wanted to say that for Winooski, I was blown away by the presentation. And in the what was so impressive, and I'm so impressed by the social justice initiative from Winooski and how they empower their students to tell their voices. And I was very impressed by seeing the educator there and just being so supportive while each and every girl told their stories of racism, of what it's like to be in Vermont as a refugee, about stories about, wearing the hijab, what that means. And one thing that I did learn, and it's something that for the communications that came up, was in regards to translation and language. There was he was also from Winooski, and he spoke 7 languages. He was talking about how a lot of the translation that's done is done through the written word, and at Winooski they do it through audio. Everything is done through audio. They do the phone calls with audio because a lot of the immigrants who are here, they might not necessarily know how to read in their language, and that for some of them he was saying that some of them haven't graduated from elementary school or 3rd grade. So he said this notion that everybody can actually read the translation is I don't know other way to put it, but it's a biased viewpoint in our society. So having that translation go through audio, and also with the text messaging, they can also translate that audio through their phone as well, is really important at Winooski, and I just found that to be very impressive.
I want to support that point of view as well. What Ruby said, having attended the past 2 years, it was the first one last year that was incredible. Both keynote speakers were brilliant and on target, and it's a problem whenever you contract with a keynote speaker. As good as they might be, it might not just hit the mark. This year, I don't think it hit the mark as strongly as it did the prior year. This year as well, the conference was essentially only one day. The night before was the dinner and the student performances, and I'm not suggesting that the student component wasn't part of the conference, but the year before it was built in differently. So you actually had 2 full days of workshops, and I thought a number of us have spoken to Sue Zaglaski, the executive director of the VSBA, to say go back to the model of the prior year. So she's heard that message again and again. Nevertheless, it was important to go to this conference. The takeaway, there's always a takeaway, as well as the work that we do as board members and as a superintendent in sitting together at a table, in talking about board issues, but also laughing and joking. And as I say, talking about board issues, let me just announce, we were not a quorum. I just want to say that. We were 5 board members. I did a count. We all did a count. So, Lake Morey. Yeah, thank you. Mark.
Yeah, it was a great opportunity to network throughout the state, and just spending that time with board members in a different way was a really nice experience as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that
and
was
to see superintendents and board members from across the state,
Yep.
I think is important. Yeah. Tim.
So the year before, there was a really powerful keynote addressing the threat to public schools by private organizations, private schools. I wondered, was there a continuation of that, or was there any discussion of issues at the national level threatening public schools?
No, not at all.
I guess there's none.
No.
But budget was a big topic throughout the conference. How to go about communicating your budget with the community and highlighting things that are going well and strategies around telling your story, essentially. That was a major theme that I kind of took away from it.
Yes, and I think that was somewhat expressed at the finance meeting that just took place. The need to hold small clustered meetings with stakeholders in order to truly explain the budget. Okay, if there is no further discussion on this, any other business having to do with board business as we move on? Okay. So we're 1 hour in, and we have both a fiscal report and an administrative report. I'd like to take a 7-minute break and come back at 7:05. The board is seated, and we are beginning with the fiscal report. Thank you.
Okay, and I think we have the budget planning topic for this evening. So Finance Committee met earlier at 5 o'clock, and does anyone not have a copy of the budget planning timeline? I think a lot of folks were here. Yeah. I'll get to the Windham SU as well. Anyone else would like a budget planning timeline? We all have it? Okay. So, we went through this, so maybe, I think most of the folks here were here at the finance, is that right? So I could probably abbreviate the discussion a little bit, okay, lots of nods. All right, so a quick recap of our budget timeline. We go to the statutory date of March 18th, where the board has the obligation to present and warn a budget for the electorate to act upon. Our articles of agreement make that March 18th, which is the third Saturday in March, so that's an annual reoccurring date. Moving backwards from there, there's also, we have many public information meetings, but there's also an official one that's required within 10 days. I'm sorry, no less than 10 days, yes, of the annual meeting. So we have that on the 11th, and then once a meeting date is established, as you know, the board has a statutory requirement to warn the annual meeting. Again, February 11th is within that, no earlier than 40 days, no less than 30 days prior to the meeting. So the board action needs to occur on February 11th. And then we come back to when would the board need consensus on the plan to be presented to the electorate. Typically it's that last meeting in January, which allows for an annual report to be organized and then printed, and then again that's required to be distributed to the electorate no less than 10 days. You can see our schedule calls for on line 30, February 26th. We think that's well in advance of the meeting, but it's generally as fast as the printer can turn a draft file around after the board warns the budget. Obviously can't publish a annual meeting, a document until the board takes that action. So that brings us back to the work that has been underway now for we really consider it a continuous budget planning process. So over the course of the year, we talked a bit about how our presentation topics at the board meetings really relate to the key program and investments that we make through the budget process. But as far as deliverables in the next few weeks, maybe we'll jump to line 11, which is today. It's agreeing on the timeline, and we did make an adjustment in finance. It is a draft, and that is we're going to change the 18th finance committee meeting to the 19th, and those meetings are going to be at 5 p.m. here. So that's on the 18th, the 25th, and December 2nd. And you can see for those initial drafts, now it's the 19th will be the elementary program, the 25th will be secondary, the 2nd will be our preliminary review of revenues and some of the other operations, and then We hope to see a initial index published by the Agency of Education, which would include the all-important yield figure and then also the weighted average daily membership. Those are, we really can't define revenues and tax impact without those figures from the state. And that's why we would not want to have a comprehensive budget before that date, and our earliest opportunity would be December 17, to bring all of the assumptions together into an initial draft for this board. So you can see this schedule contemplates 3 meetings with finance, iterative process with the major components by grade level, and then bringing that all together with some funding statistics on the 17th. From there, a second draft with discussion on January 14. And then normally we do get revisions from the Agency of Ed mid-January on some of the refinement. By then the legislature is in session, and sometimes they have technical corrections or even messaging to the state around what they're thinking in terms of funding and potential changes to the funding formula. But a third draft on January 28th that will allow for a formal board approval. All of these dates are open to the public, and there is a lot of engagement ongoing through those meetings, but also obviously to get to an initial draft between our principals, our lead teachers, our many stakeholders in the system. So that's a quick overview of what we discussed.
Okay, Sean?
Yeah, I just like, one observation that I see is from line 4 to line 10. What really is happening is the educational professionals are developing their budgets at their site with help of the leadership councils. And then that's really the granular part of the budget development, is hearing from educational professionals what they need in order to accomplish the best student outcome possible. So I would just like to emphasize how important that is, that the people, the educational professionals that actually spend time with the students have the most granular understanding of the financial requirements in order to make a successful public school system. Thank you.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Other questions, comments? Ruby?
Something that I kind of didn't raise this in the finance committee meeting, in part because I think it's a board issue. What's been raised in the past is a conflict that I wasn't really aware of because I don't live in Brattleboro, but the timing of our annual meeting is really problematic for anyone who serves as a representative in the town, in Brattleboro as a town, what do you call it, the annual meeting representative town meeting. If you're a representative that goes to the town meeting, because that's it's within a week of this of our annual meeting, and that's it just jams up the energy that Brattleboro folks can focus on. So I know that it's been asked before that we consider, is there any space for movement of our annual meeting? And I think the answer is always, looking at this planning document, there are some really hard and fast things that like information coming from the state, we can't move it, and that, like playing with other dates doesn't always work. And in addition, I just kind of scanned the Articles of Agreement. I didn't see anything that laid out specifically with specificity what the date needs to be. I might have missed it, but so I just wanted to ask if if we were to consider the previous requests to shift that date, what would it mean? How would we do that?
Typically, the board would have to place a warning, an article on the annual meeting warning to change the date. And it would be voted by the electorate.
And to the extent that, and as I said, I'm not a Brattleboro person, so I don't know what the right date is to meet Brattleboro's needs, but if there was a way in which 2 weeks earlier would make more sense. What I've heard you speak before, not talking about this year, but talking about future years, I've heard you speak before about how that a shift of that nature would jam up some part of the earlier planning schedule. Is there a way in which, if we had foresight around planning for, we're talking about over a year from now, in terms of timing, is it realistic that we could consider that kind of a shift?
Well, the trade-off is you can see the planning and the, essentially weekly meetings starting in November through December, and yet the key indices that we need don't come out until mid-December. So by moving the date earlier, you compress what can be done between December 15 and as you move the March date earlier, you just have to potentially shorten up the number of drafts that the board can contemplate. You essentially have to accelerate this timeline that you're looking at already, because you're getting information out to the public through the annual report, and then the warning requires that 30 to 40 day window. So it's kind of problematic from that point of view. If you want to engage folks more, it takes away that opportunity. On the other hand, to go later is really challenging for our administrators, because every year the candidate pool is really come and gone when you start getting into April and May, and obviously recruiting and replacing our retiring employees every year is one of the most important things we do, and we want to be as early as we can in that. So the March 18 was a result of an awful lot of discussion several years ago, and that was the consensus of the board when the district was formed, and that was with the input of Brattleboro representatives.
Yeah, I think that I'm thinking back to I think it was last year and possibly the year before. I remember Robin Morgan's voice as she was a seated board member at the time, and also was a member of the representative town meeting. I don't know how they call themselves, but she's one of them. And I think that I heard her when she had some thoughts. Her thoughts might not that what you're saying could be true. One person's thoughts don't debate the whole process. But I just wonder if it wouldn't make sense to consider it again. And honestly, I think I look to the Brattleboro, the members who are from Brattleboro in the room. You understand that the impact to your community. I do think proportionally our participation in the annual meeting from Brattleboro townsfolk is it's low, and so So that's is that a reason why? Maybe not. We could change it to something we think is ideal, and it still people wouldn't show. So, you know.
Tim?
Yeah, it is low. It's typically less than 1%. But you compare that to Windham Northeast, they have 20% participation, vote. That's because they have Australian ballot. So there's a tension there between a long-held New England tradition of town meeting versus Australian ballot. It's 1% versus 20%. It's a tough decision, but I would be for more public participation in the ballot. But that's just one point. But I have a question for you, Frank. Line 28. It has prepare superintendent, principal, and board reports. What does that mean?
It's traditional. Yeah, I assume you recognize the reference to the annual report.
Is that when it's all due?
That's right, in that it's a reflection of what the board consensus was around a plan, and then essentially reflecting on that and representing both goals and how we've achieved or our progress, and then what the future investment is intended to do. But it is intended to be a result of the deliberative process.
Okay, now I would just like to note, you probably already know this, we have a policy called annual reports, which specifies pretty clearly what each school report should entail. So I'm sure the principals will follow that policy. I forget what number it is, but it's called annual reports. Just one other question, if I may.
Sure.
The town meeting, the primary purpose is to vote on the budget, but there are also other articles. What's the deadline for including an article in the annual meeting?
It's got to be part of that warning on February 11th.
So February 11th would be the deadline for adding an article.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, Eva?
Oh, I just have a question in regards to the leadership councils and the finance. So there was an input that was said that the leadership council should be engaging with their educational professional about what it is important for their finance for their school. Who would be that educational professional? The other question in regards to that is that there has been some input that board members should be engaging in conversations in finance with leadership council. And that information, when I have asked that question, I've been told that should be going to the superintendent. So I'm just would like a little bit more clarity about how that process would be.
That would happen at the leadership council meeting with the principal and school staff, to help the principal develop his or her budget throughout the budgeting process.
And then would the board get a report from the leadership councils as far as like what's important to that school?
There's an opportunity each month for the leadership council to engage with the board.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns? Ruby?
I think I think that if I'm hearing Eva correctly, I just want to kind of acknowledge something that came up in the finance committee meeting. I think that I do think there's an opportunity for this board to be very proactive. In this budgeting timeline, there's a period between when the budget's approved by our board and then considered in the annual meeting in March. And during that time, we do have an opportunity to do some outreach and potentially do it differently. And I do think that there are probably a few different models to do that. And one suggestion that we discussed was being deliberate about utilizing the leadership councils and as a way to engage. And what that looks like could be different from leadership council to leadership council, but if we as the board prepared something that was kind of easy to chew on, easy to understand around some of the, budget, the proposals in the budget and the things that are in the budget, that might be something that we as board members in the month of February could bring to each of our leadership councils. And I think some of them are not as active as others, so there may be a school that might not have as active a leadership council might have to find other ways to do that. But it would just be a tool that could be useful. And I'm not sure if that's exactly what Eva's speaking to, but that's what was discussed, I think, in finance committee.
Sean?
Yeah, I'd just like to sort of piggyback with what Ruby said. The Independent Budget Review Committee usually presents their report well in advance of the annual meeting. Last year, because it was so tumultuous, they weren't able to do that because everything got switched right at the end by legislative mandates. So, but the Independent Budget Review Committee report is so valuable. It basically lays out all the things that Ruby just referred to in 6 pages. And it's so clear. It's such a fantastic document. And we should be thankful that those 4 independent people from each town takes the time and the energy to put into it. I mean, I think it's fantastic.
Mark, did you have your hand up at one point? No, okay. Tim?
Yeah, the IBRC report is invaluable, but it's addressing the entire budget. I agree with what Ruby says about the importance of the opportunity to engage with leadership councils, but for that we need data that's clear and digestible, that's easy to consume by the school. For example, information on racial analysis between admin costs versus direct instruction, athletics, support mechanisms. We just need more data to present to leadership councils, otherwise we have nothing to talk about.
Anyone else?
So Deborah, I just want to make sure we're clear on, we changed a couple of dates, so I'm going to edit the calendar. But so we're going to a Tuesday evening on November 19th at 5 p.m. And then we're going to go back to the Monday at 5 p.m. the following week on November 25th. And then we're staying with the Monday finance on December 2nd at 5 p.m. Just want to make sure everybody was clear that it's a Tuesday and then 2 Mondays. Yeah.
Right, that's my understanding.
Okay.
Those are my notes from the finance meeting.
Okay.
I think a number of issues have just been presented by board members as well as community member in the finance meeting, and that is a need for community outreach. And I think that goes beyond the 6-page report that the IBRC puts out. And that is not a negation of their hard work or the clear presentation of that report. But I think that we benefit if we present the financials of the district in a variety of ways. And not everyone is going to sit and read the 6 pages of the IBRC report. They should, but they may not. So I think there is some value to considering a variety of ways of presenting this information. So we sit with that for the moment. And I think this needs to go back to the Finance Committee. Okay. Anything else having to do with the fiscal report? Okay, we are moving on to the administrative report. Mark?
Okay. My first item we already discussed earlier in the meeting in regards to food services. Last Thursday and Friday were half days for students. The second half of those days were used for parent-teacher conferences. And during that time, our curriculum office organized professional development for all of our para-educators. So coming around right now is the title of the various workshops that were offered on Thursday and Friday of last week. And you can see that a majority of these are being led by curriculum office, diversity equity office. I think it's a really great example of distributed leadership that follows our professional day in October 15, where we engaged in a similar opportunity for the entire school district. So in short time, I think our para-educators have received terrific opportunities to grow. And I just wanted to highlight that work and really thank the curriculum office for taking the lead in developing those opportunities. Third one, it was referenced earlier tonight. There's an opportunity for us to engage with the AOE and the Listen and Learn tour. I reached out to the AOE last week and to share that we would like to participate and provide that opportunity for our community. So at this point, I'll be sending more logistical information out later, but we have agreed on December 3rd. And Hannah is going to let us use the auditorium to provide this opportunity for our community. The Listen and Learn tour in Springfield, Vermont was targeted towards administration and board members. This opportunity is for everybody. Board members, admin, teaching staff, the entire community. So there will be dedicated time in the auditorium for the presentation, and then time to ask questions and engage in conversation with AOE. And then there will be likely 2 breakout sessions in classrooms that are fairly close to the auditorium. So that is in place. I'll be sending out more logistics later on once I have them in terms of time, childcare, food, whether those are possible or not. The AOE is looking into translators to assist with the meeting as well. So certainly more information to come, but I thought that was a really nice opportunity for our towns to engage with the AOE. And as you know, Zoe's an interim secretary of Ed right now. Yes.
I just wanted to flag that is our VUHS Leadership Council date. And so I would just suggest, and I'm happy, either Hannah or I could bring it back to the chair. It might be a good opportunity for the Leadership Council to kind of be like a sponsoring, entity in terms of people understanding, welcoming them to come and engage. So then it would take the spot of our monthly meeting, but and I can't speak for the chair in that, but I think that the Leadership Council is probably going to be like, great, this seems like a valuable use of time.
Just so you know, I did email everyone already to say that we needed to change the date because of this.
Oh,
So,
there's that too.
so either way, but just so, when you open your email later,
Good.
I sent that earlier.
Okay, Jody, I see your hand up.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Jody Normandy again. And I'm sorry, Mark, but I I didn't quite understand all of what you were saying. This is not connected with the Commission of Education. This is an AOE thing on December 3rd.
The Secretary of Education Listen and Learn Tour.
Okay, all
She's
right.
holding them throughout the state.
Okay, so it's different than the commission then.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. This is an opportunity for the AOE to share their vision, receive feedback, answer questions, and engage with the public.
I hope they come with some vision. Thank you.
You're welcome. Me too. So that's essentially the report tonight. I wanted to highlight the professional development on this opportunity with the AOE and talk about food service and next steps. And we'll talk more tomorrow night at the SU meeting.
Okay. Any, I don't think there are any hires, resignations, or
There's
retirements?
one resignation.
Ah, okay.
Mark Barnes has resigned from Green Street School, 5th grade teacher.
Okay. Is there a motion to accept that resignation?
So moved with regret.
And we've got a second. Any discussion? So the motion to accept the resignation with regret. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
With regret. And any opposed? Any abstentions? Good.
Just have a question.
Tim?
When you have a resignation at this time of the year, do you have a long-term sub?
It's tricky. It's not easy. So we do a couple of things, kind of reshape the staffing, current staffing in the building, and also utilize the assistance of a long-term sub. So we're in the process of kind of a multi-step approach to covering the classroom. I don't know if Kate is online, but she could speak more specifically.
I am. Hi, everyone.
You want to speak to that, Kate?
Sure. Yeah, we've reshuffled some things currently. Eric Liberdoni, who teaches 6th grade and is a math teacher, is teaching both 6th grade math and 5th grade math right now because both grades are departmentalized. So he's really set up the 5th graders with routines and structures and gotten them going, which has been great. And our instructional coach has covered for him in his morning meeting time, kind of when the kids first get there, eat breakfast and settle in. So he's working extremely hard, teaching both cohorts. And we have a regular sub who's often at Green Street. She's been there consistent for a few weeks. And we've got an ad up for a 1-year position.
Okay, thank you. Ruby?
I see a new hire that was supposed to be at this meeting, unless it was retracted in some way, but.
I think it's on hold right now.
Is
It's
it
on
on
hold,
hold?
which is why it's
Okay.
not being presented.
Okay, great,
Okay, right.
thanks.
Okay, anything else for the administrative report?
Not tonight.
All right, so we are up to the consent agenda. And a series of warrants, payrolls, as well as approval of minutes from October 22, 2024, and October 29, 2024. Is there a motion for the approval of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, no discussion. Is, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Consent agenda has been approved. And we are moving on to topic for new business and topic for unfinished business. Is there anything else that we need to discuss at this evening's board meeting? Well then, with that in mind,
Madam Chair, there being no further business before this board, I move that we adjourn.
is there a second?
Seconded.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We are adjourned at 7:42 this evening.